Hello, I'm Muriel, and I love true crime.
I'm Nick, and I am not a fan.
Thank you for joining us. Each week, I force Nick to listen to me tell him a story of a true crime. Welcome to Muriel's Murders. This week, we're bringing you this story that I came across on accident. I was going to use it to lead us into a different story entirely, but this was so weird and terrible that I just couldn't stop reading about it.
That's a good thing, I guess.
I don't know, man. So I'm going to do it like this. These stories are not super related except for the setting.
Okay.
So I'm going to actually do the story I was really going to do on the Patreon for this month. So you can kind of see if you listen to this one and then you hook up with the Patreon, you can kind of see the combination. So it's not really a part one and part two because the characters are the people are completely different.
Yeah.
But
the place is the same.
it's exactly the same place and it has a lot of commonalities to
Okay.
it.
Cool. Very cool.
Yeah. So this is all collected. I wanted to say this last time. So like the big shtick of this, right, is that Nick doesn't know what I'm working on ever. So
No.
it's always a surprise.
Yes.
And I sometimes will have sources that give away what's going to happen. And if I don't want him to know, I try to hide them from him. So I don't know if I feel like I do want to say that. I don't know why.
Right. Like if it's like the name of the book is The Biggest Murder Where the Husband Did It. And then you tell me a story. I'm like, okay, so the husband did it.
Yeah.
Based on the stupid name of the source you used.
Like for those, I try to just be like, well, that's obviously not going to be like the surprise twist of what I'm going to talk about. But for this one, I think I'm not going to tell you because of the kind of person you are and what you're going to assume.
Don't blame me for your choices, Muriel.
Well, I just know how many questions you're going to ask me
So
based on
annoying.
how much information you have.
I feel like that's not a me problem. I feel like you're blaming the victim.
Well, no, it's not really even a problem.
Okay.
I'm just saying that's how I'm doing things.
All right, great.
And you're not a victim.
Okay.
You're a podcast host. All right. Our main sources for this episode, they're reporting from Ann Weiner for the New York Times starting in 1988. She did some really cool stuff around that era. And an essay from a collection of writing Albert Borowitz did for the New Law Journal. And this particular essay was published in 1995. That's it, man.
Cool. Very
you got
cool.
anything to say?
Yeah, man. Speaking of Patreon, we want to thank Veronica S. for signing up. You new and returning Patreon supporters, you guys just make our life shiny and glowy. We love you so much. There's so much good bonus content over there. Thank you to everyone who supports us either through that or through the Spotify subscription service or who sends us a little dough through our little PayPal link. We buy, beer with that and shit. Get a Miller High Life or something. Yeah, only beer. And we love you guys so much. Thank you for finding us on TikTok and YouTube, specifically those two right now. And also Instagram, but you got to do what you got to do out there in this social media landscape. But we do love it when you guys follow us and like us and all that kind of fun stuff. Yeah. So be good to your brains and treat social media however you need to treat social media to get through this world in a healthy fashion. And if that including Muriel's Murders, then thank you and we love you.
Did you write that or did you just improvise?
No, that was off the dome. That was just freestyle. I'm just flowing.
I could tell. We were joking that, we're still kind of learning how to record this on video. So.
We're not learning how to record this on video. We're trying to do it with as little money as humanly possible.
Well, that equals like a different setup each week. And right now we figured out a way to make it so like I'm kind of more facing the camera. But that means I literally can't see Nick. I can only hear him.
Yeah. I'm staring at the back of your iPad, which is where Muriel does all of her writing, and just pretending that's you and being like, ooh, I'm engaged.
And I'm looking at myself in the camera when I talk to you, which isn't even, I'm realizing the camera lens. It's a different thing. So anyway, if you're watching this,
God bless you.
Media savvy.
Think of it as like a Criterion collection, like it's not the best movie, but it was sort of like important in some evolution, so they included it kind of
Well,
thing.
I included that mostly because I could tell that you made that up, even though I can't see you because of the way you were talking.
I improvised my announcement today.
So I just like you. It's fun not seeing you and hearing you.
Yeah, it's like we're
now
actually.
I can't see if you're making a face like you don't get it or whatever.
Uh-huh.
I can't see anything.
It's
So
like
it's going to be
we're-
like a surprise for me what you're going to say next. You know what I mean? I don't really know.
All right, let's get on with this. People, we do actually do a true crime podcast, and we promise we don't waste a lot of time.
Okay. This is a true story involving murder, violence, drugs, adult themes, etc. So if any listeners are like Nick and they don't want to hear about that kind of stuff, go listen to a different podcast.
We do joke, we do curse, but we don't waste any time. We get directly to the story.
All right, Nikki, are you ready to hear this story?
No.
Okay, let's get started. It's June 1987 in Boynton Beach, Florida. Hunters Run, a posh country club just developed in the 1970s. It has an 18-hole golf course. And the area in general was experiencing an economic boom while still retaining an old Florida charm. Everybody drops this, in the descriptions of Boynton Beach. I don't know what that means, so I kind of had to...
What, old Florida charm?
I was like, what does that mean? So it means like more trees, kind of like a laid back southern vibe. I'm picturing like Spanish moss, maybe like that kind of stuff.
All right.
So 36-year-old Dr. Scott Robin Roston walked into the club, past the pristine golf course fringed with palm trees, and into the main lobby for one of his twice weekly massages. Scott,
Ooh, that's good living. Twice a week at a massage.
Scott had chronic back issues from an injury he suffered several years earlier.
Definitely not good living.
And came to Hunters Run to work with his regular massage therapist at the club spa. But that day, Scott's regular therapist was gone. And instead, he was assigned to 26-year-old Karen Waltz, a strawberry blonde trained dancer, too petite to be a professional ballerina, but extensively trained. She was into meditation, very gentle and soft-spoken, a small town girl. And Scott was born in the Bronx in New York City and was a chiropractor like his father. And he worked in California for a bit before moving to Florida, where his parents lived. And despite his back injury, he was a gym rat. Visibly muscular, tan. His thick black hair had some 1980s style height to it. His mustache was as bold and thick as a swatch of shag carpeting. The fantasy of this
amazing.
meeting and these people, it was all just too delicious. They were both fitness freak. Karen religiously power walked 10 miles every day. And they had both recently broken up with long-term partners. They were fresh and on the rebound. Karen, the archetype of petite, soft-spoken femininity, the masseuse who dealt in healing touch. And then Scott, the older worldly man, a burly, masculine chiropractor who healed with bone-cracking manliness.
Sorry. This is too funny. You're doing very good. Did you say how he hurt himself? I'm just laughing at the idea of a chiropractor throwing out his back doing chiropractic.
No, I didn't tell you, but you'll find out.
Okay. That's
So anyway, you can imagine the spark between them was a wildfire.
I wonder how you would describe us, like if you didn't know us and you were like trying to do this version of who you and I are. Because that was really...
They looked the same. Slowly morphing into each other over time. Melding each other's facial features and hair length.
And psyche and opinions.
And everything.
Okay.
They looked like two of the same coin.
Yeah.
Strangely enough, they look nothing alike. But everything alike.
We're like Kafka with the fly or whatever, but we're just the fly for us is just one being.
I don't know what that means. They often wore the same colored T-shirts and had to change before they went out to avoid embarrassment. All right. So Karen Waltz, she grew up in Lake Worth, Florida, about a 20-minute drive north of Boynton Beach and the Hunters Run Club where she worked. And while Boynton Beach was experiencing an economic boom, right? There were golf courses and country clubs going up everywhere. Lake Worth had been in a heavy slump from the time that Karen was a child. It was a fairly small town, around 20,000 people. Seems kind of like John Mellencampy, based on the Google map view, like little pink houses, the interstate running through, high schools next to some industrial stuff. In the 1960s and 70s, Lake Worth's big claim to fame was its smut palace, the Play Toy, where people came from all around to watch dirty movies. When the porn flick Deep Throat came out in 1972, it caused controversy across the nation. In one obscenity trial, one judge called the film a, quote, feast of carry-on and squalor, a nadir of decadence, and a Sodom and Gomorrah gone wild before the fire. Another judge
He's
said,
like, 5 stars, 2 thumbs up, go see it immediately.
Another judge said, I don't understand how you can spoof fellatio by just doing copious amounts of fellatio.
He's like, it's not ha-ha funny.
He's just like, what's your argument? Anyway, all of that obviously pretty much accidentally helped make this film into one of the most popular adult films of all time. Yeah. So anyway.
Have you ever seen it?
No.
I haven't either.
I just think the name is really funny.
Yeah, of course.
Because they just won't give up the other thing that's about like the FBI or whatever. I don't know.
Oh, right, because Deep Throat's an FBI thing. Wait,
it's
what?
It's like an informant thing, right? So like it was this. Actually, we're going to sound really stupid.
Okay, we'll come back to it. Do an episode about it.
It's really funny to me.
I wonder if it's good.
Like these serious guys are like Deep Throat, and then someone's like, hold my Miller High Life. All right. Anyway, they definitely played it in Lake Worth at the Play Toy. And the theater was definitely raided by police several times as a result, because it was just like so scandalous. And then the internet happened. All right. So Karen Waltz was born around 1960, the second daughter of Richard and Roberta Waltz. Her parents had a super nasty divorce when Karen was really young. So her dad took off, and Roberta raised Karen and her older sister Julie single-handedly in this small, declining town. Now, obviously, they were pretty broke, but the girls were talented. So, according to just tracking the family through, I know it sounds so creepy, through like some archives, I think her older sister Julie actually got a scholarship in high school to do this really prestigious STEM program at the University of Florida in 1975. And I think she started working as an epidemiologist in Vermont by the late 1980s. So she kind of got into science and is like high up in that. Karen, the youngest, kept close to home. So she went to Our Savior Lutheran Elementary School in Lake Worth, Florida, and graduated from Lake Worth High School in 1979. And Karen was more of the artsy one. She got a full scholarship to the Fusion School of Dance as a kid in Miami. And she also danced locally, performing regularly at the Institute of Performing Arts in Lake Worth. And she's just described as like an extremely talented dancer. I looked up this Fusion School of Dance. And I'm not exactly sure it's the same school, but if it's the same school, it was like a pretty big deal scholarship for her to get into. It's the Fusion School, and they have this like really acclaimed dance team. So it was actually kind of a pretty big deal. Anyway.
Cool. So, they're doing good, those
kids.
So
both the kids were kind of getting out. Eventually, Karen decided to become a massage therapist. So Karen studied at the Academy of Healing Arts in Lake Worth, and that's closed now, but it was popular at the time. They did stuff like cranial sacral massages, right? But then also permanent tattooed makeup. It was sort of like a beauty school / wellness center that opened its doors the year that Karen graduated high school. So by the time Karen was 26, she'd pretty much spent her entire life in Lake Worth. She hadn't traveled much, if at all. And then this wealthy, handsome, older client walked into her life, this man, Scott Roston. And he lived in all these different places. He was classy. He was perfectly groomed. And they shared so many of the same interests: fitness, wellness. They both worked to heal people. And in a few weeks, Scott was head over heels for Karen. The day Karen introduced Scott to her mother, Roberta, he brought Roberta roses from his garden and pronounced his love for her daughter. And Karen
That's a pretty player move. Like, here's some roses. I grew
them, right? And Karen was convinced this was the man who would sweep her off of her feet and take her out of Lake Worth and give her the life she'd always dreamed of.
But you're saying in a way that makes it that's not going to be what happens.
Later, that's why I don't read you the headlines of the article sometimes. So later,
who kills who?
Roberta said of their first meeting, quote, "We thought he is too perfect.
Uh-oh.
Not a hair out of place. Perfect physique. Looked as if he had a lot of money, which now I know he doesn't."
See, that's why. Oh, okay. Boom. So he's broke. That's why I don't shave the back of my neck very often. I got to keep that ungroomed because I don't need people thinking I'm some kind of liar. You know, I need people to know.
I cannot believe you're saying that. I shave the back of
I
my
know,
neck,
but I don't
and
ask you to do it all the time. And
you
it
just
needs to happen.
forget, dude.
No, it's a purposeful trait of mine because I need people to know that I'm a good person. So I show that by not trying to present as particularly respectable, you know?
Nobody can even see the back of your neck.
That's not true. Every time I walk away, they're like, that is a fine ass. Oh, never mind. And then I'm like, boom.
We walked home from Trader Joe's yesterday. And two different people said, "I don't know who's prettier, you or
No,
him."
that's not what happened. First of all, there were two different homeless people. And one guy said, "I don't know who's prettier, you or him." And the next guy said, he said, "Get rid of that girl haircut and get a real job."
He was talking it was so perfectly executed. I forgot that is what he said.
Yeah.
Get rid of that girl haircut and get a real job. We were just walking with Trader Joe's bags.
They both were all love, those two.
Yeah, it was just kind of like hanging out.
Yeah.
In our neighborhood. That's pretty much what's going on.
That's what's up with Los Angeles. If you were curious how LA is, that's how it is.
All right.
Great.
Yeah, in different parts, different people. The reality of Scott and Karen was a lot less delicious than the fantasy of Scott and Karen, for sure, right? So Scott was unemployed and living with his mom about 3 miles away from Lake Worth in Lantana, Florida. So the roses that he gave Roberta that day were actually from his mom's garden.
I was okay. That makes sense. I was like, it's actually not player at all to be like anti-garden.
It is if you do it, but if you don't, I think it is. But if you bring them from your mom's place and say, like, "Yeah, I grew these for you,"
I stole these from my mom.
Lantana was even smaller than Lake Worth, just AutoZones, Chick-fil-A's, and like regular old suburban houses. Now, Scott did have a degree in chiropractic medicine from Life University in Marietta, Georgia, the same place his father received his degree. And in the world of chiropractics, this is a pretty important school. At one point, or maybe still, it might still be the biggest single campus chiropractic school in the world. Also, like, it was founded by major figures in chiropractic medicine. Anyway, it opened in 1974, so both Scott and his father, Cy, were at the beginning of the rise of chiropractic medicine in the U.S. The school is a little wonky, though, just to be fair. It has a spotty history of keeping its accreditation. They lost their accreditation like 20 years ago, and then they got it back, and then they got on probation a bunch of times.
It's like chiropractics, man. You guys already don't have like the greatest reputation, you know? It's like...
So you told me I can't dunk on chiropractic. So
I don't really want to dunk on them, but I'm like, you guys got to keep it together for your own sake, your own reputation.
Just this particular school definitely has been on and off. And like, according to people on Reddit, like, they're just, people are like, I work there now. We're on academic probation, like we're on probation, or like we're in the red zone. Everyone's quitting. Like, they're talking. So people are definitely like, if Reddit's real, and those are real people. I can't imagine a bot would care about that. But who knows?
Yeah, maybe some other chiropractic schools like sending out AI bots to talk trash about
Could be
that school on Reddit.
Could be. We're in that zone.
Yeah.
But anyway, kind of spotty, but cool. You know, like they were there at the beginning when I think it was a smaller school and maybe a little more like specialized and kind of radical, like maybe better teachers. I don't really know. At any point, let me go back to say this. I do think his degree from Life University is how Scott got a doctor in front of his name. He doesn't have any other education aside from that. But I'm not sure they were doing like doctoral degrees back then. So I'm not really sure how that works. Okay. Anyway, regardless, although Scott graduated from Life University, he was actually never licensed to practice chiropractic medicine in California, in Florida, or anywhere else in the States for that matter. Scott did have some money though. In 1982, Scott had slipped on a rotten banana and fell down the stairs at a Florida shopping mall.
Really?
And he hurt his back and then won a settlement in 1986. So,
literally on a banana peel?
Yes.
You swear to God.
I swear to God. The story gets really dark, so take it while you can.
Take it while you can. Slipped on a banana peel.
This is like the fantasy versus the reality is so absurd.
Now that is ha-ha funny.
So he was paying for his sharp clothes and country club membership with his banana peel settlement money and his disability payments from Florida. You know, and also, you know, for the record, it sounds like for 26 years old, Karen was also still a little naive. You know, she'd never really, you know, gone anywhere. Family friends later said she was the type of person that kind of refused to think that bad things could actually happen to you. You know, she was into dance and music and meditation. You know, she never drank or did drugs, but she had tons of friends and stuff. Overall, she was just like a regular, nice girl, very well liked in the community. Just maybe it sounds like from what I read, a little young seeming for her age.
I hate it when you use the phrase family friends later said. Something's going to happen to her. That's...
Gosh, you should have been a detective. Her coworkers at Hunter's Run. It's so funny being sassy to you when I can't see you. It's outrageous. Her coworkers at Hunter's Run at the country club said that she was giddy about Scott, like very much in love with him after knowing him just for a month or so. But also they said, you know, not in like a kind of gross way or anything, but she just like really actually believed he was really, really rich. Right. Mm-hmm. So she was also like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm dating this super rich dude. She never had any money growing up. So she thought their relationship was kind of like a Cinderella story. In August 1987, about a month or so after they started dating, Scott decided to move across the country to Santa Monica, California for business. Now, he told Karen something grand and vague about teaming up with a lawyer to help people out of foreclosures or something. In Santa Monica, he rented a room in a 2-bedroom Ocean View condominium. And his roommate said she didn't know what he did for money. All she knew was that his answering machine said something like, "You've reached Roston and Associates." But he paid his rent on time and leased himself a cute little 2-seater red sports car. So destined to be together, they weren't going to let thousands of miles keep them apart. Karen and Scott started a long-distance relationship that August. And despite his effusive loving, Karen's mom, Roberta, was suspicious from the jump. She noticed Scott like only called Karen about once a week, right? For someone being so in love. And Karen said, "Hey man, you know, Scott just doesn't like talking on the phone," right? And then the first time Karen visits Scott in California, you know, they hung out in Santa Monica, and then he took her to see some of her old friends in Santa Cruz, California. And her Prince Charming, Scott, just left her there with no way to get home. They never talked about it. He just left. So she had to borrow money to get back to Florida. She was just kind of stuck in Santa Cruz. But that didn't faze Karen one bit. Roberta however, was seeing red flags all over the place. Her mom thought this whole thing was crazy.
Yeah.
And then on Thanksgiving, 1987, on her second trip to California, Scott proposed with a beautiful little teardrop diamond engagement ring. Karen came back to Florida ecstatic, wiggling her ring finger to everyone she knew. And Roberta had that shit appraised behind Karen's back to see if it was fake. And it totally was. It was a fake diamond.
That's hilarious.
And when Karen found out, she had a huge blow-up fight. Not with Scott, but with her mother.
Yeah.
The meddling was far, far worse for her than a cubic zirconium engagement ring.
That's pretty good mothering.
Mother? After the engagement...
She mothered the shit out of that situation.
So after the engagement, Karen resigned from her job and got ready to move to Santa Monica to be with Scott. Now, Scott said Karen was so desperate to get married that the soft-spoken woman couldn't contain herself. Scott, according to Scott, he said, over their 6-month-long distance courtship, Karen proposed to him 3 different times before he finally relented and popped the question. But Roberta had an entirely different story. She said Karen's plan was to move out to California to find out what it was really like to actually live with Scott. That she wanted to take her time. She wanted to wait until June 1988 and have a formal wedding. So she wanted to live with him for about like 6 months before she really said yes. She, meaning Karen, even told a close family friend that, hey, man, you can always give back an engagement ring if it doesn't work out, right? So in January 1988...
That's true, people.
It's
if anyone
totally
needs to
true.
know,
If you
can
need
call
to know,
it off.
Call it off. So in January 1988...
And if someone lies and said this is a real diamond and it's not a real diamond, lying about it is pretty drastic.
Yeah, I mean, real diamonds, like, who cares, right? It's like...
Yeah, either you care or you don't, but lying about it's a whole other thing.
Yeah, definitely.
Anyways.
So in January 1988, Karen made the big move to California and brought her life's savings of $1,100.
I shouldn't laugh at that. I don't know why I laughed at that.
Well, you know.
I don't feel,
She thought she was moving in with like a millionaire, maybe.
Yeah.
So less than a month later, they were on their way to Las Vegas to get married. They paid a $25 fee for a civil ceremony and then drove back to Santa Monica the same day in Scott's little red sports car. Their first night as a married couple, Scott watched Star Trek while Karen made dinner and hung out with Scott's roommate. They announced the marriage to their parents over the phone, and that was the last time Roberta ever spoke with Karen.
Oh, no. Really?
So 2 days later, Karen, Scott, and 731 other passengers left for a week-long cruise to Mexico on the Star Dancer. Scott told his mom that Karen had won this awesome honeymoon cruise in a contest just right after they were married, but he later admitted Karen just paid for it out of her savings. To the casual observer, they seemed to be having a great time. One of the crew had nicknamed them the All-American Couple. You know, they were attractive. They had these really fancy dinners together and then burned off the calories with daily jogs around the track on the upper deck. And then, on the last day of the cruise, in the wee hours of the morning on February 13th, Dr. Scott Roston ran frantically to the bridge to report his wife has fallen overboard. And they had decided to take a midnight run on the track, as one does. Mm-hmm. And he said Karen was blown off the jogging track by a gust of wind. And then, before anything else could happen, he asked the staff captain to use his bathroom, where Scott spent a considerable amount of time washing his face. And when he emerged from the bathroom, the crew could see he had 3 small chunks dug out of his cheek, along with a deep 6-inch scratch.
Oh, God.
So,
okay.
This is already extremely suspicious, right? First off, the weather was super mild. Prevailing winds were like 5 miles an hour. And then also the jogging track closed at 9 p.m. and the chief purser's room was right underneath. So one of the staff members' room was right underneath. And he hadn't heard anyone jogging after 9 p.m. that night. He can hear everything that is going on up there. Now the ship's doctor, Dr. Young, he was a deputized law officer in Hawaii. So he stepped in and he asked if Scott would be okay with answering some questions. He also got Scott's permission to audio tape the session. So Dr. Young questioned Scott with the door open for an hour or so. The story was pretty jumbled. When confronted with the balmy weather, the closure of the track, and, the questions about the scratches on his face, Scott changed his story completely. In version number 2, he launched into a description of how intense actually, this is how it starts out. So he said, okay, so what's going on? And he's like, let me tell you from the beginning, like what my fairy tale relationship is like, and then we'll get into it, right? So he's got this whole lead up in this tape.
It's like, is your wife just die? Is he crying?
In parts of it, yeah, he is. And then in parts of it, he says other things. Okay. So he launches into this description of how intense his sex life was, how he and Karen bit and scratched each other all the time. Mm-hmm. He said Karen was so enthusiastic about their marriage. She said God must have personally brought Scott to her to make her this happy. And then he started crying, talking about their fairy tale marriage, about how passionate they were about each other, while also valuing personal space. He told Dr. Young, for instance, during his honeymoon that week, he had enough alone time to play so many video games that he got blisters on his fingers.
He's watching Star Trek and playing Atari or whatever was out back then.
What were you playing? He tearily admitted that Karen paid for the trip herself, and the hot goss that Karen and her mom were in the middle of a terrible fight. Now, according to Scott, he told Karen up front, I can't afford a diamond ring. But Karen didn't care. She said she'd rather have a cheap ring and Scott than a diamond ring without Scott. But Roberta had evilly gone behind their backs and had the ring tested. And she was using the fact that the diamond was fake to call him a phony guy. And the whole thing was really unfair. So he did take a second to kind of vent
Talk
to
some
Dr.
trash
Young.
about Roberta real quick.
Yeah, about how nobody's treating him the way he should be treated. Da, 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 da. And Scott said, listen, he didn't actually see Karen fall because he was resting while she was doing this late night power walk. But he said it was windy and wet on the deck and that Karen was kind of irresponsible. She liked to play reckless pranks. Like one time she jumped on the hood of his car to demand a kiss. And he said, actually, to mention it, Karen had fallen on the track a couple days prior. She was leaping and twirling and dancing around, and she had slipped and fell and hit her head on the track.
Parkour power walk dancing.
Right. So about the fall over the deck, he said, well, maybe she was stupid and spinning around dancing again. I don't know. That's a direct quote.
Oh, God. R.I.P. Karen. So she's gone.
Yes.
She's off the edge of this boat.
Yes.
Is anyone okay, all right. Sorry, you'll tell things, I'm sure.
Anyway, Dr. Young asked about the fresh scratches on Scott's cheek, and he said he had heard Karen screaming, ran across the deck to see her sort of hanging from the outside of the railing and lunged to save her. But on the way down, he hit his head on an electrical box and he scratched his face. And then when he came to, he passed out. And when he came to, Karen was gone. So for the record,
oh my God,
his story is his 5'3" wife fell over a 4-foot railing for the love of dance. And then he got fingernail scratches from a smooth, featureless electrical box.
While he tried to save her and then blacked out and she was gone.
So after the questioning, Dr. Young and the crew put Scott under guard in an empty cabin until the ship docked. They were just like, you're not going anywhere, buddy. The Coast Guard found Karen's body the next afternoon off the coast of San Diego.
R.I.P.
She was on her back, her hair fanning out behind her, with bright red, angry bruising all around her neck and a large bump on her forehead. Now, the body was found mostly because Karen was still wearing her workout clothes. On the long fall down from the top deck into the sea, the clothes had filled with air. And when she hit the water, it kept her body afloat.
Whoa, that's pretty crazy.
But Karen's lungs were filled with water, so she had died in the water. But medical examiners theorized that if Karen had tried to swim or struggle, the air would have worked its way out of her clothing. So it was likely she was unconscious before she hit the water.
Damn.
And then she drowned.
Damn.
She also had hemorrhaging in her eyes and damage to her neck bones, indicating she'd been strangled.
Jesus Christ.
And even after floating in the water for hours, Karen still had pieces of the rubberized running track on the ship embedded into her clothes, indicating a violent struggle on the track.
Oh, like she had been smushed into it.
Yeah, and then back on the ship, authorities found pieces of Karen's broken earring embedded into the track and a clump of hair that had been pulled out of her head.
So what, this chiropractor fake Rose Gardner dude is just out here just strangling and just slamming his little wife around and throwing her off the edge of the boat? That's what's going on? That's this guy?
Well, I don't even know if that's a question.
No, I'm just saying,
a rehash,
like,
right?
that's crazy.
Yeah, no,
yeah.
it's
I mean,
crazy.
I guess it's a rehash, but it's also like, so when he was 4 years old, he killed puppies. Like, who the fuck does that?
I don't know. I really tried to figure out a little more about his life, but there's no there's no book, there's no doc, there's not even a Wikipedia page about this guy. So it's like kind of hard to find like early life stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really know. It does seem pretty wild. I will say this is there's a lot of talk about different psychiatric like evaluations that should have existed somewhere that like it just aren't. I just couldn't find copies and I don't think they made it to the trial. So there's something happening, but that makes sense. Anyway, I don't want to get you. Let me just do this.
All right, keep going. Now I want to know,
Scott was arrested and held without bail as soon as they hit land. Officials found books in Scott's car with instructions on how to make bombs. And they also found he had served in the Navy with a possible psychiatric discharge. And so that's, again, not something that I could confirm. And the head of the California Chiropractors Association said Scott wasn't licensed in Florida or California and wasn't listed anywhere in any official capacity as a chiropractor. So they don't know what they're dealing with this guy. And then 3 days after his arrest, Scott Roston released a statement through his attorneys. He was finally ready to tell the truth about how his wife, Karen Waltz Roston, died. And the truth was, Israeli operatives killed his wife and framed him in retaliation for his self-published book, Nightmare in Israel. An explosive expose Scott had released in the spring of 1987 about his alleged imprisonment and torture in Israel in 1979.
Okay, here we go.
See,
now we're cooking with gas.
While Karen Waltz was graduating from her small town high school in 1979, Scott was in an Israeli prison for assault and armed robbery.
Is that true, or this is what he says it happened?
That's true.
Oh, that's true.
But he has a version of how it happened, what happened. Okay. But that was what was happening in 1979. Then after that, he slipped on that banana peel in 1982. And then he had time to write about his experience in this prison. Mm-hmm. After he published the book in 1987, Scott claimed Israeli agents had been stalking him, trying to kill him. Once he said they tracked him to a shopping mall in Florida where they had a shootout and he narrowly escaped. Scott said Israeli agents had infiltrated the ship on his honeymoon, drugged him with hallucinogenic drugs, and killed his wife. Scott claimed the other stories he'd told authorities about like the wind blowing Karen off the ship or Karen dancing to her death. Those were just byproducts of the drugs because he'd been high as a kite when he said all that stuff.
Oh, God. See, the better lie would have been I was worried they were still on the ship and I didn't want them to kill me or something.
And then Scott finished with, I guess they wanted to frame me because of my book. You can send a message to the people who murdered her that her death is not going to be in vain. An Israeli government official responded, calling Scott's story a third-rate Hollywood movie. Now, I couldn't find a copy of Scott's book. I think there's only hard copies available now, and they're $35. There's no PDF or anything like that. But I did find several synopses. So I knitted them all together for a general vibe of the book, just to give you an idea of kind of what it's about.
Okay, good.
So can you hear this beeping? I'm so sorry. But
I don't think that I don't think it's showing up on mic. And if it is, people, my bad.
you know, this is an Etsy situation.
Yeah, you're just
Making this in
supporting
our
like
house. Here's
folk art, you know?
We can't be responsible for this truck outside.
You know what I mean? We
Oh
don't
my
have the
God.
Spotify money, okay? We're not on Wondery or whatever the Who Framed the Best Friends Killing or any kind of popular, I don't even know. Whatever the popular true crimes are, you know? Anyways, continue. Sorry.
Thank you. Faceless voice. Okay.
This is like a real podcast, you know? Like I'm really
It's
listening
real.
to
I know.
you.
I know. You're really listening to it. So here's the thing. So Scott Roston claims to have Jewish ancestry on both sides of his family. And in 1978, he and his parents, Cy and Sophia, decided to immigrate to Israel and open a health clinic there. And those are true things. So the book opens with a sex scene starring Scott and a woman named Fortuna.
Oh.
And this apparently is one of several graphic sex scenes sprinkled throughout the book and completely unrelated to the plot. Now, Scott wrote that their time in Israel started off well enough. They got housing in a settlement community. Scott got engaged to an Israeli woman, and he and his dad opened this clinic. But soon things started to fall apart. Scott listed out, he had a big list of atrocities, he said, that were committed against him by the director of the settlement center where he lived with his parents. One of the atrocities on this list was forcing him to share an apartment with his parents for 6 months, among other things.
So he's just throwing the word atrocity out pretty willy-nilly.
I
at this
feel like
point.
we could maybe come to that conclusion.
Okay.
And then because the Rostons didn't have the correct paperwork to practice chiropractic medicine in Israel, the government ordered the Rostons to close the clinic and leave the country, which obviously, what was the plan here? You're going to come halfway across the world just to like not file your paperwork and have an illegal chiropractic business?
You're sharing an apartment.
Anyway, I don't know.
Torture.
It doesn't feel like it very super thought out, but who knows? Maybe 70s are crazy. Anyway, after the clinic closed, Scott's fiance broke off the engagement. And he wrote in his story that he was broke with no money to return to the U.S. And he was just like kind of staring off into the ocean at the beach, pondering his future, when a man with a, quote, soothing voice approached him at the beach. Okay, this gets complicated, so I'm going to speak slowly.
Thank you.
So the man...
Start over. The man.
Okay.
This is already off to a rocky start.
This guy approached me at the beach with a soothing voice.
Yeah.
The man was a member of the Jewish mafia disguised as a Hasidic Jew. And Scott wrote that the mafia guy said that he was going to kill Scott's parents if Scott didn't rob some random rich couple for him. I guess this couple had some black market currency and some gold. So, armed with a wooden club to save the life of his parents, Scott went to this house in late August 1979 to commit this burglary. But he realized when he got there that he actually knew the family. It was a couple who lived near him, some neighbors, who had tried to bribe him to marry their daughter earlier that year.
He is just constantly getting pushed around.
I guess the broke, unemployed, unlicensed chiropractor. He was in really high demand. Okay?
Well, they had heard about all that hot, steamy sex he had with Fortuna.
Yeah, he's like, oh, Fortuna's been talking.
Yeah.
So Scott at the time had refused the marriage and offended the family. Mm-hmm. So Scott wrote that at this point, he decided not to rob them magnanimously. He put down his wooden club and he told the family all about this smooth-voiced mafia guy dressed as a Hasid who blackmailed him into robbing them. Well, instead of being grateful, Scott wrote that the family called him a maniac and then reported him to police. So at this point, Scott said he was falsely arrested for assault and armed robbery in a crazy plot involving the mafia and this rich family and all this kind of stuff.
And him just trying to be a good guy.
Yeah. And then in prison, Scott wrote that while he was in prison, he was drugged with hallucinogenics and abused. And he said he faked a mental breakdown to escape prison. He sucked his thumb. He cried. He acted like a small child. He was then sent to a mental hospital after that. And he said at this point, the prime minister of Israel got involved and he refused to release Scott because he was afraid Scott would blow the whistle on the whole crooked system and the mafia and the hallucinogenics, right? But eventually it worked. The whole I'm having a nervous breakdown scheme, it worked. And Scott and his parents were sent back to the U.S.
Well, him having a nervous breakdown right now sounds like the most realistic thing about any part of that story.
Yeah, there's like peaks of truth in some of this.
But it's like the one thing he's saying I faked.
Oh, yeah.
He's saying, I didn't have a nervous breakdown. I pretended that part. It's like, probably that's the only part that is real.
Well, and he's saying that about like other stuff too. He's like, I faked well, not I faked it, but like, oh, I was high. That's why I said this thing. And like, I'm not, like, like that there was another reason.
Yeah, there's always another reason for everything he's doing.
Yeah. So when he got back to the U.S., Scott Rage wrote a 184-page book, all in the first person voice, and paid a company to print 1,000 copies of Nightmare in Israel. Now, I think what we know is, yes, the Rostons went to Israel to open an unlicensed chiropractic clinic in 1978. But to be fair, chiropractic medicine wasn't recognized or licensed by the Ministry of Health in that country until like 2010. So before that, there was sort of different ways you could get certificates from different, bodies and organizations and stuff. So it seemed like actually licensure changed a lot, and maybe it could have been confusing at the time. So I'm just going to say that. And then, we know Scott Roston was arrested and charged with assault and armed robbery in Israel and spent, I think, 2 months in total, split between prison and a stint in a mental hospital.
But did he break in and just say, actually, I'm not robbing you guys? Like, is that part real? Like, did he say that to the family? Or did he
we know, this is all we know. We don't know. We don't have, like, the police records from Israel or anything like that. We just know his angry story about what happened.
Okay.
And then this sort of, he did get charged. He did go to prison. And then he did go to a mental hospital. And then he did get deported. Those are the things we know. Okay, so the family returned to the U.S. in 1979. Scott bounced around for a bit. I think he attempted to work in California but before returning to Florida in 1982, slipping on a banana and falling down the stairs at a mall. He got his settlement money from the accident in 1986. And then, just the year after, he paid a vanity publishing company to print 1,000 copies of his book. So as soon as his money came in, he got that book out. The book was published and released in March 1987. And then shortly afterwards, Scott's mother, Sophia, called police in Lantana, Florida to report a prowler in her backyard. So the police showed up. They found no evidence of a prowler, but she says somebody's been stalking me in my backyard, where also her son is living. And then the next day, Sophia called police again, this time to report the attempted abduction of her adult son, Scott. Scott had come home from the mall, loves the mall, come home from the mall, breathless. He told his mother 2 Israelis in a white van had approached him in the shopping mall parking lot. They grabbed him and said, "Israel wants you," in Hebrew. Later, Scott told the LA Times, quote, "I had a gun in my car. Since I wrote the book, a lot of people told me, carry one." Scott claims he busted free, reached into his Toyota Supra, grabbed his gun, and shot one of the men, then managed to escape. Afterwards, he drove 20 hours straight to the nearest FBI office to report the abduction. A description of the van was released to the public, but after absolutely no evidence of a shooting or abduction or like a guy in a hospital or like a bullet or anything.
I was going to ask, were the police called about a gun going off in the parking lot at the mall?
No, no witnesses came forward. No one knew anything about what he was talking about. The investigation sort of petered out. The FBI didn't even get involved. They couldn't figure out anything to corroborate what he was saying.
So he might be like schizoaffective or paranoid schizophrenic or something.
In an interview with the Palm Beach Post, Scott told his harrowing tale and said that Israel took its best shot and they blew it. The sheriff at the time said it was all pretty fantastic, even for South Florida.
Fantastic meaning fabricated.
Strange.
Yeah.
Yeah. 2 months later, after that alleged abduction, Scott met Karen Waltz. Scott claimed, quote, "She said she fell in love with me partly because of my book. I've waited all my life for someone like her."
Mm-hmm. I really feel that.
And for the record, her mom, Roberta, doesn't think Karen even read the book.
I'm sure he did not. I'm sure he really... It's like, oh, I'm finally meeting someone who doesn't know about my book. Everyone's laughing at me. Finally. Yeah, that would be like my like dream girl. Like if we broke up, I'd be like just a girl who has no idea I've ever attempted anything creative. All of that is just my hidden past.
I got your number, baby. Scott tried to get, Karen Waltz, Roston, was memorialized in late February in Lake Worth, Florida, at her local Lutheran church. About 100 people came to the service, and her ex-boyfriend, small town boy everyone thought Karen would end up with, he was the one that did Karen's eulogy. Scott tried to get transferred to a low-security psychiatric hospital in June 1988 and was denied. Obviously not. Like, they found books about how to make explosives in his car. You know, they're not putting him in a low-security prison. His attorney said, well, clearly Scott bought those books to learn how to protect himself from Israeli agents. So why are you tripping, right? Now, because of sea laws and other complicated things, Scott Roston was eventually charged with second-degree murder. That's what they could charge him with. In the lead up to the trial and after the verdict during the appeals, Scott was an absolute pill when dealing with his lawyers. He kept trying to get the court to appoint him new counsel. He went through 3 lawyers before settling on one. And then he got mad again and tried to force another lawyer swap by giving his lawyer the silent treatment. Now, I read the case files for his appeals, and one judge wrote, quote, "Any breakdown in communication between Roston and his current counsel was entirely Roston's fault. He said he had important information for his attorney, but refused to tell him what that information was." And that gives you insight into this guy's personality.
Yeah, I feel like he might be... I mean, he's obviously disturbed, but I feel like there's a chance that he's not just lying about this, that he believes some of these lies.
Yeah. I mean, I think that there's a chance. I think also, well, I'll read you more things.
Okay.
I think that I think that if you're benefiting in some way, like if there's a touch of narcissism in a lot of this, and like sort of
good point. I see where you're going. Yeah.
Planning and fabrication.
Right,
I think that that's
I'm
not the same
awesome
thing as psychosis.
I did the right thing at every turn.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, I get that.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot more building of this thing
Right.
than somebody who's in psychosis. That's what I would say. Maybe a combination of both. Who are we? We're just people in a living room sweating.
Are you sweating? I can't see you.
I know, but I look cute. I'm glowing.
You're glowing. All right,
I look
cool.
real cute.
Yeah.
Okay.
The back of my neck, all those neck hairs, sopping wet.
Oh, no, don't tell me that. Too soon. Anyway, the trial began in February 1989, and Scott's defense team stuck with the Israeli agent assassination plot story.
Really?
Which, if you can believe it, oh man, that defense really didn't hold up in court. So now, the defense didn't call a single witness. The prosecution, on the other hand, had a stable of witnesses who painted a different story of the Rostons on their honeymoon cruise. Other passengers saw Scott Roston as a petty tyrant. And most of that came out at those fancy dinners at night. So dinner was a big fancy affair with white linens and a million different forks. And then groups of passengers would sort of rotate through sharing tables with different dining companions, right? So they weren't all two-seaters. They were larger tables. Yeah. And the people who dined with Karen and Scott said the tension was almost unbearable, that he was really cold. He was always frustrated with her. He told one of their dinner partners at one point that Karen, quote, had a problem with sweets, like not as like a joke or something funny, but just sort of like Karen as if she's not there, Yeah. I'm sorry, my wife has a problem with sweets.
Yeah, because she's deficient. Who doesn't like sweets? She doesn't have a soul.
And then when she would say stuff like, no, meaning like that she eats too many sweets.
Oh.
Too much. And she needs to control herself.
Oh.
And,
so she's gross in that way.
So then he's talking all this trash about her and she just would go quiet. She wouldn't argue back. Another couple saw Scott steaming with anger after Karen used the wrong fork at dinner. And then on the last night of the cruise, the night Karen died, the ship held this special event. It's called the Captain's Dinner. And the Rostons' dining partners that night told the story about how after dinner, the crew passed around petite fours. Those are those little fancy mini cakes, and then as a little amuse-bouche to dessert. And then they lowered the lights to bring out a fleet of flaming baked Alaskas.
Bomb.
So those are complicated ice cream cakes that are covered in meringue that you can set on fire, flambe tableside with liquor. Kind of like a toasted marshmallow.
Give me one right now. Stop talking about it.
It's pretty cool.
Much.
And when you look at them when they've been flambéed, like a train of them coming out of the kitchen, it's
that's so cool.
Pretty rad.
Now I want to go on a cruise minus the murder part.
So while all the theatrics were going on, right, Karen apparently reached over and snatched a leftover petite four and popped it in her mouth. You're supposed to be looking at the Baked Alaska thing. It's dark. It's the big theatrical show-stopping end thing. So maybe a slightly trashy or childish thing to do. Not to me, obviously, but with the Queen's English or whatever. Don't take a second petite four when
it's
Baked
would you
Alaska.
look away from a solar eclipse? It's like a shooting star.
Yeah,
this
right.
Baked Alaska. Pay attention to it.
And so while he didn't say anything to her, the witnesses said that Scott was just radiating this volcanic rage throughout the dessert. And Karen looked afraid of him just because of her snatching this little piece of cake and eating it.
It's their honeymoon.
I know, Nikki.
Baby, I'm telling you right now, if we get divorced and get married again and go on another honeymoon, you can eat all of the amuse-bouches you want, okay? And I won't.
I have and I did.
Yeah. Well, it can
and
happen.
I will.
Okay, good. And I'll be looking at the Baked Alaska like a gentleman, like a refined artiste.
So another witness, a masseuse on the ship, said Karen accidentally knocked over a vial of oil during a massage, and she just snapped and begged him not to tell her husband. Also, Scott told a fellow passenger that what he loved most about being a chiropractor was his absolute power over his patients. that he could either cure them or do great harm to them. So she was pretty freaked out about that. She testified about that, And then finally, kind of more substantially, another witness saw them arguing on the deck about an hour before Scott said Karen went overboard, and they were with raised voices.
Yeah.
And the physical evidence just told this terrible story of violence. Karen's broken diamond and ruby earring embedded in the rubber of the track, the ripped out hair, the bruising on her neck, the fact that she was still alive when she fell several stories into the water 20 miles from shore. Now, Scott cried during the trial while his mom handed him tissues, mourning what the covert agents had done to his wife.
Also, like covert agents, I mean, I don't know, but I feel like that's not how they're going to kill someone. Like hand-to-hand combat on a cruise.
Well, I will say, I mean, it does sound like a pretty stupid-ass story.
Okay.
When the prosecution played Scott's first tape interrogation, the one that he did on the ship with Dr. Young, Scott's mom shouted "ghouls" at the prosecution and ran out of the room. The defense didn't call any witnesses, and they didn't have Scott take the stand. Their main argument for why the jury should believe Scott's story is because the story was so shitty. Like, if you were going to plan a murder, you'd probably come up with a more plausible story, right?
Right.
And espionage happens every day. Just because those things happen in the plots of like a James Bond movie doesn't mean they don't happen in real life. So stop being so skeptical, right? It's the only thing they could come up with. The defense couldn't counter any of the physical evidence or eyewitness testimony, but the only thing the defense pointed out was that there were 2 Israeli nationals on board the night that Karen died. They weren't able to subpoena them, but the defense was like kind of suspicious,
Wait,
right?
nationals just means what? They're citizens of Israel?
Yes. He said, this is pretty suspicious. Just think about it. That's what that's the only thing they had.
Okay.
So in rebuttal, the prosecution actually did the work to contact the Israeli passengers, and one of them agreed to testify as a surprise witness. Maurice Haziza was a high-end wedding photographer on vacation with a friend. They were in California photographing a wedding for a friend, and then afterwards they went to Disneyland and Universal Studios and topped it off with a cruise to Mexico. He laughed basically almost the entire time, like at the idea that he was like Mossad or like some sort of agent. He was like, I literally laughed when they called me and asked me to come testify. So all Scott's lawyer could do to counter that was say, of course, a secret agent would say that. Obviously, they're not going to admit to being a secret agent.
So it sounds like the worst lawyer.
I feel the same way. Also, just to add, at the trial, the Vanity publisher who released Scott's self-published book testified that before Karen's death, only 1 of the 1,000 copies printed was actually sold.
I feel like they had probably a decent chance of like insanity.
Maybe. I mean, there's a lot of planning involved. I don't know.
There's not that much planning. It seems like he just freaked out and choked her and threw her over. But he got this history of like, oh, I had this breakdown in Israel. I wrote this book that everyone knows is a lie.
And they did say like they were trying to get transcripts from the mental hospital in Israel, and they couldn't get them in time for the trial. I think part of it is because he switched lawyers so many times. But yeah, I understand that. Scott Roston was convicted of second-degree murder March 22nd, 1989. The jury forewoman said she thought that he needed a psychiatric evaluation. At the time, there were some new untested sentencing guidelines that allowed the presiding judge to impose a harsher sentence than was typical for second-degree murder due to what he perceived as extreme cruelty. So he ended up sentencing Scott Roston to life without parole. On appeal, Scott Roston's new defense team dropped the whole espionage thing and said that the real reason Scott deserved a resentencing was because the court had made a mistake at trial. Now, Scott's defense was arguing that the jury should have been instructed that they also had the option to convict Scott of the lesser charge of voluntary manslaughter. That if there was adequate evidence of provocation by the victim that could cause a reasonable person to kill them, that the option of voluntary manslaughter should have been on the table. So they argued, I can't believe they actually did this. Mm-hmm. They argued that Karen eating double desserts and not knowing about forks was enough to cause provocation, enough provocation to cause a reasonable person to kill her.
Jesus.
They even said there was a half-eaten pie found in their suite that was also evidence of provocation. And then they said the final straw was when Karen allegedly scratched Scott's face, which now they were claiming happened before the entire physical attack happened.
Uh-huh.
So the appellate court found this to be completely absurd. Scott picking on Karen for not using the right silverware was just him being an abusive asshole, right? And no one knew when Karen scratched his face. More than likely it happened when he physically attacked her. But they found the judge had misinterpreted the new sentencing guidelines and was out of line sentencing Scott to life without parole for second-degree murder. So he was resentenced to 33 years in prison instead. And according to the Federal Bureau of Prisons, he didn't die in prison. I couldn't find anything about him after his last appeal failed. He didn't die in prison, though. And Scott Roston was quietly released from prison in 2017. And he's just roaming around. I'm pretty sure he's in California.
Oh, God.
So
I hope he doesn't listen to podcasts. We were just joking, Scott. If you're listening, it was all you could just write a nightmare book about something. I don't know. Actually, don't do that. R.I.P. Karen. Jesus Christ.
Pretty crazy story. I just was reading it and I was like, oh, that's crazy. Oh. I just was like, I can't not talk about this thing. It was just too weird.
Yeah. Well, that's, a shortcoming of you. My wife has a problem with murder podcast people. Okay. Thank you so much for listening. Muriel Montgomery did all of the research, and then she said the things that she researched in a way because she wrote it. That's how she spent her time all day and yesterday. And I do all the recording and the editing and all that kind of stuff and the uploading. So this is like a little two-person mom and pop Etsy situation. Thank you so much for listening, for supporting us. Thank you for showing this show to people in your life that might enjoy it. And we love you. Muriel, you got anything for the people?
No, man. Cool. Stay cool. Stay chilly, man.
Yeah, stay chilly.
Yeah.
Be good to yourself and each other. R.I.P. Jerry Springer. Goodbye.